we haven't met, my name's Steve. I'm one of the pastors here at Christ Center, and just super thrilled to be up here this morning. Welcome to those online. Excited that you're joining us as well. This morning we're going to be in Mark chapter 3, if you want to turn there. And we're talking about a moment in Jesus' life that was we'll just call it a Rubicon moment. You know what the Rubicon was? The Rubicon was a river, and Rome knew and had a plan that if any army ever crossed the Rubicon, they would crush them. So the Rubicon was kind of like the line. And once you crossed it, there was no turning back. Well, Caesar had been banished. The Senate was in control. But Caesar decided to go back and take Rome. And he came to the Rubicon and he stopped with his troops. And he said, "Do we go forward?" And they all shouted, "Yes, let's go." And he crossed the Rubicon. And once you cross the Rubicon, there's no turning back. This moment was a Rubicon moment for Jesus. Because after this moment, two enemies would work together to try to kill Jesus. The Herodians and the Pharisees. Two very different groups of people, two very different purposes would combine with one singular focus, and that is to get rid of Jesus. He is disrupting our power. He's disrupting our wealth. We don't want him here. He must be gone. This is the moment that happened. I'm calling the message, Stretch It Out. Let's look at Mark chapter 3, and we'll start in verse 1. He entered again into a synagogue, and a man was there whose hand was withered. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever had something in your life that was withered? Maybe it was a relationship. Maybe it's your health. Your health right now, it's a little bit withered. Maybe it's your calling. Maybe God's called you to something and you just have let it go. It's withered. Perhaps it's trust in someone. Someone broke your trust. Maybe it's trust in God. But have you ever had something in your life that was withered? See, they were in a place that was a synagogue. And the synagogue was a place that was meant to be a sanctuary of worship, truth, and community. It was a place where you would gather to hear the word of God. It was a place where the community came together. And that's where they were, in the sanctuary, on the Sabbath. And Mark tells us that his hand was zirino, withered, which means dried up, possibly paralyzed or shriveled from some kind of disease. And it wasn't just a physical problem, it was a spiritual problem. It was a social problem, and it was an identity problem. Luke's gospel tells us that it was his right hand, indicating it was his primary hand. The hand that he would most likely provide for his family with. Now, because his hand was withered, it was very possible that this man, because he could perhaps not do the labor that was necessary to provide for his family, it's possible he had to beg. And in a society where wholeness equated holiness, this withered hand branded him as cursed, forgotten, and an outcast. Now, he would have been certainly invited into the sanctuary. And he probably went into the sanctuary and sat in the back. You see, in this day and age, he was considered unclean. Now, he wasn't ritually unclean like, say, a leper, but nonetheless, he was unclean. Which meant that he couldn't offer certain sacrifices and he couldn't participate in certain spiritual activities. He would have been looked at as less than. He would have been looked at as someone that must have done something in order to have this ailment. So you can imagine him walking into the synagogue, feeling less than, feeling isolated, feeling like he was not a part of the group. And there he was, sitting in the back as an outcast. Mark 3:2 says that they were watching him to see if he would heal him on the Sabbath so that they might accuse him. They there refers to the Pharisees. They were the religious leaders. They were the protectors of God's law, and they were watching him. Watching is the Greek word paratoreo, which doesn't just mean watch, but to watch with malice, to spy on, to scrutinize with hostile intent. So they weren't just watching him, they were watching him. You ever had someone look at you in a certain way and you know they're watching you? And it wasn't just observation, it was surveillance. It was entrapment. They wanted to use this man as an object. That's all they cared about. They were objectifying this man. He refused. He became, let's see, how can I phrase it? He moved from a he to an it in their minds. All they cared about was how they could use him for their purposes to trap Jesus. Someone already feeling forgotten, already feeling an outcast, already feeling like one on the outside. And now all they cared about was how they could use him. And what's crazy to me is that they didn't even question whether Jesus could heal him. They knew he could. They just questioned whether he would heal him on the Sabbath or not. Because if he did, then they got him. I want to talk about 3 actions and 3 attitudes that lead to a miracle. Mark 3:3 says this. Jesus said to the man with the withered hand, "Stand up and come into the middle." Jesus calls the man to stand up in front of the very people that have looked down on him. In front of the very people that want to use him, he says, "Stand up." And standing up takes courage. That's the first point. Stand up, courage. If you want a miracle, sometimes you got to stand up. And you got to have courage. You've got to be bold. And I'm sure it was uncomfortable. He was used to being in the shadows. No longer in the shadows because Jesus had him stand up. Now he's public. No more blending in. Front and center, spotlight on him. Stand up. But he did it. Despite all the ones that would look down upon him, despite the religious leaders, he stood up. It takes courage to stand up when Jesus calls you to stand up. I remember a time when I had just started in ministry, and my wife and I had been working with an organization that dealt with tobacco use and alcoholism in teenagers. And so we were invited to go to Washington, D.C. to this, where all these faith leaders were gathering together. And so we flew back there. We'd never been to Washington, D.C. Amazing time. By the way, get in before nightfall. I learned that very quickly. But we got there, had a great first day. I mean, the who's who of faith leaders were there around the table. And we were talking about, strategies and ways in which we can combat tobacco use and alcoholism in teenagers. And then we finish, we go to our room, and it's about 10 o'clock at night, and the phone rings. And I answer it, and it's the organizer of the event. And this lady says, "Hey, I was wondering if you would be willing to lead the devotional tomorrow. And I started going through the Rolodex of excuses in my head. Okay, I'm not feeling well. Anything I could think of to try and get out of this. But in that moment, I knew Jesus was saying, stand up. I'm calling you to stand up. And I didn't want to stand up. But I did. I stood up. And I stayed up all night working on a devotional. I just shared with them the parable of the tree that was not producing fruit, and how the caretaker came and brought in the fertilizer and did everything he could to try to save the tree and so that it would bear fruit. I don't even remember all that I said, but that opportunity God used to create some relationships with some people that went on for the next, I would say, 20 years of my youth ministry journey. I had partnerships that I would have never had without that opportunity. Solidified relationships with organizations and with people. God had a purpose for it. I didn't see what the purpose was. He just said, stand up. Oh man, many times in my life, God said, stand up. I'm sure it's true with you as well. Stand up. It takes courage to stand up. But he stood up. And as long as you hide what's withered, you'll miss what's waiting. Did you hear that? As long as you hide what's withered, you'll miss what's waiting. If I would have made the excuse and kept my withered hand hidden, and if I hadn't stood up, I would have missed what was waiting for me. It's true of all of our lives. We want to hide that which is withered, and God says, it's in your weakness that I am strong. Don't you understand that? And that's why Jesus said to stand up, because courage is step one. And courage is not the absence of fear. Believe me, I still had fear. It's deciding to obey in spite of the fear. And by the way, the word stand up is not just stand up. It's resurrection language. As a matter of fact, it's the same word that describes Jesus rising from the grave. It's that kind of stand up. It's the kind of stand up that brings new life. Not old life. That's resuscitation. I'm talking about new life. That's resurrection. I don't want my old life back. I want new life. Right? We don't want old wine, we want new wine. But in order to have new wine, you need new wineskins, and that's called obedience. God's calling us to stand up. Some of you in this room, he's saying, stand up. It's time to rise so that I can empower you and fill you with the Spirit for new life. And then he says this, come into the middle. I know some of your translation says come up front, but it's actually aiste maison, and it means to literally come into the middle. What do you mean the middle? You see, in the synagogue, they were in a semicircle. And you had the scribes and the religious leaders sitting up front in this semicircle. And the teacher was in the middle, this word, aiste maison, in the middle. He called him not to just stand up, but he says, step in. Stand up and step in. That had to take faith. Stand up, courage, step in, that takes faith. Because here he's going to be front and center with all these people. Half of them want to use him. Half of them think that he's less than. He belonged on the fringes. What's he doing in the middle? But that's what Jesus said. Come to the middle. Jesus pulls him into the spotlight. The place where the teacher is supposed to be. You see, he wants them to learn a lesson here. This is what he's saying. He's saying, come to the place of instruction. This is where I teach. It's the epicenter of learning right here. I want to teach them something. And that's what faith is. He didn't hold back. Remember, it was his Rubicon moment. All of them were watching. Jesus knew that. He knew that they wanted to trap him. He saw the glares in their eyes. He knew it was a trap. But what did he do? He still called him forward. And you know, healing on the Sabbath, that was a capital offense. You could actually die if you healed on the Sabbath. They had made laws around protecting the Sabbath, and one of the laws was you could not render aid unless it was life-saving aid. Well, this wasn't life-saving aid. Now, it's true in Jesus' day, Rome would not allow them to execute anyone. But nonetheless, this was serious. And the scribes knew if he actually healed this man, they had a case. What did Jesus do? He says, come to the middle. Come to the middle. Stand up and step in. That's faith. Believing you belong even when you feel disqualified. Some of us, we feel disqualified. We feel like we failed or we've dropped the ball. Or we're less than in some way or another. I want to remind you this morning that His grace is sufficient for you. It's enough. Come to Him, let it go, and step into the middle. He wants to put brokenness at the center of worship. Isn't that what we all want to do when we worship? Some of my greatest worship moments were not when I was strong. It's when I was weak and I was broken and I just brought what I had to the Lord. And that's what this man did. He brought his brokenness to the center. The man stepped in and Jesus stepped up. I love that. You see, faith isn't just believing God can. It's stepping out like He will. Did you hear that? It's not just believing He can, but it's stepping out like He will. That's faith. It's like having if God doesn't show up, I'm in trouble moment. Have you ever had those? If God does, I had one right now. I'm having one right now. If God doesn't show up, I'm in trouble. That's what we all have to live by, that kind of faith. Because God's going to ask you to do stuff beyond you so that you know you don't get the credit for it. He wants to empower you by His Spirit to do miraculous things. And we're just content to stay in the crowd when He wants to do a miracle in our life. Mark 3:4 says, is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath? To save a life or to kill? But they kept silent. Jesus is saying that not doing good when you have the power to act is morally equivalent to doing intentional harm. Inaction could potentially be sinful, even on the Sabbath. Jesus' brother James learned this from Jesus when he said, if you know what to do, the thing to do, and you do not do it, for you it is a sin. Therefore, to the one who knows the thing to do and does not do it, to him it is a sin. Now, we're not driven by law. We're led by love. Do you hear that? We're not driven by law. We're led by love. Jesus was led by love. Love for this man. And I would say this. Love for these religious leaders too. Oh yeah, he didn't just love this man that was being used as an object. He loved everyone in that room, including those religious leaders. That's why He brought this man up. He wanted to teach them what real worship is. He wanted to teach them what real faith is. Yeah, they wouldn't listen. Is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath? To save a life or to kill? That seems awful harsh, doesn't it? To kill? It seems extreme. But the word life here is not the typical word we think of when we think of life. It's not the word bios, which is where we have like physical life, like biology. It's the word psyche or soul or emotions. Jesus is saying, is it good to kill a life or to save a life? You see, it wasn't this man's physical body that Jesus was most worried about. It was his soul. It was his emotions. Someone who's been on the fringes, someone that's an outcast, his soul was also withering up and dying. He was being rejected by those around him, used as a puppet in a master plot to kill Jesus. And his soul was withering away, just like his hand. Depressed, discouraged, vulnerable, and Jesus knew it. Mark 3:5. After looking around at them with anger, grieved at their hardness of heart, he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." And he stretched out his hand, and he was restored. When it says after looking around at them, this is not just a simple phrase. In the Greek, it means to pause, to not just casually look at someone, but to really look at them. This is what Jesus was doing. He says, after looking around at them, so there's the semicircle, I can see Jesus looking at them one by one. He didn't do this, he did this. Not a casual glance. And then it says, after looking at them, he was grieved at the hardness of heart. What does that word mean, grieved? It means mourning. It's where we get mourning or compassionate sorrow. Jesus was looking at these religious leaders and he was saying, don't you see what you're doing to this man? Don't you see? The law will never save you. Only I can save you. Don't you see? And he looked at him with compassion. We often think of, him overturning the tables and you brood of vipers. But Jesus loved these men. And he was hurt at the core of his being that they were not showing compassion. And then Jesus says this wild thing. He says, stretch out your hand. Stretch out your hand. It's kind of funny. Stretch out. See, that's obedience. He had faith. He stand up. That took courage. Step in. That took faith. And now stretch out. That takes obedience. He asked him to do the one thing he couldn't do. Yeah, he could stand up. Yeah, he could even walk to the middle. But stretch out my hand? Have you not seen my hand? He asked him to do the one thing he couldn't do. But that's obedience. And healing happened in the stretch. Did you hear that? Healing happened when he stretched. It didn't happen before the stretch. It happened in the stretch. And he didn't just touch him. He didn't anoint him. He commanded him. He just gave him a command. And that command became the cure. Because he obeyed. Didn't come in the stretch. All right, came in the stretch. It didn't come in his keeping his hand back. It came when he finally stretched his hand out and was obedient. That was where the cure was. He didn't know. He didn't know who, but he trusted, or how, but he trusted in the who. He trusted in the who. This morning, you may need a miracle, and you don't know how. You don't know how it's going to happen. In your mind, you can't strategize it. You can't formulate it. You can't figure it out. You don't know who to talk to. You are helpless in the how, but you know the who. And that's Jesus. He still works miracles. And in that moment, when he moved, he was made whole. You see, obedience is the bridge between brokenness and God's breakthrough. Obedience. Someone needs to hear that today. You're in a moment where you're desperate. You need a miracle. I would say the same thing that Jesus said to this man. Stand up, step in, and stretch out. I believe Jesus is here right now. And I believe that Jesus still heals withered hands. As long as we focus on the withered hand, we will miss what's waiting for us on the other side. And Jesus is waiting. He's waiting for you. He's waiting at the altar. It's your time to stand up, step in, and stretch out. This morning as we close, I want to encourage you. You know, it doesn't matter how eloquent I was, doesn't matter how moved you were. All that really matters is if you need a miracle, you need to be filled with courage, full of faith, and willing to obey whatever he asks you to do. So this morning I invite you to stand up. We're going to close in worship. But as we close, these altars are open. If you need a miracle, hey, I'm not going to press this. Only you know if you need a miracle. But if you need a miracle, I believe Jesus said, I want to hand out some miracles today. So if that's you and you need that miracle, I invite you to come. Father, I just pray a blessing over my brothers and sisters this morning. Lord, I pray that there will be those this morning that need miracles that will come to this altar. Jesus, you will meet them here. You will bless them. You will heal their withered hand, whatever that is, and make them whole. Holy Spirit, you are invited into this place. In the powerful name of Jesus. And everyone said,